people are connecting that the COVID policy, the abuse of COVID policy, is due to the political system, due to Xi Jinping's, authoritarian rule of China. So people are protesting against the political system. Some people in Shanghai were calling for Xi to step down, calling for the end of the Communist Party rule.
Let's take a focus on what we know about what's going on in China at the moment. The front page of the Times this morning leading with an image of demonstrators wearing face masks and holding up blank pieces of paper indicating that they've been censored. Now, protests have broken out across the country against the Chinese president, Xi Jinping's strict zero COVID policy measures. And for a second night, demonstrators have taken to the streets in the capital, Beijing, and the financial hub, Shanghai. Well, some are calling for President Xi to resign. There have also been protests in Wuhan, where the COVID outbreak was first identified 3 years ago. Now, as we understand it, these protests follow unrest in the northwestern city of Urumqi, where a fire in a tower block left 10 people dead. People there said that the COVID policies hampered rescue efforts. And the protests are now widespread, and they are, it would seem, the most significant public display of defiance against the Chinese authorities since Tiananmen Square in 1989. Well, let's get you some analysis this morning and talk to Yaqiu Wang, who is the senior China researcher with Human Rights Watch. Good to have you with us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Just take us through the main reasons why we are seeing people come out on the streets for a second night running now.
I think the reason that is on the surface that people are so fed up with the COVID restrictions, it's so abusive, it's unreasonable, it's unscientific. People have suffered so much because of COVID restrictions. People were denied access to medical care, medicines, and food and other life necessities. Some even died because they couldn't get their family members to the hospital because the hospital is on the quarantine, or their apartment buildings on quarantine. So people are fed up. This is on the surface. Second is that people are connecting that the COVID policy, the abuse of COVID policy, is due to the political system, due to Xi Jinping's authoritarian rule of China. So people are protesting against the political system. Some people in Shanghai were calling for Xi to step down, calling for the end of the Communist Party rule.
Right. Just to get some more context to this, the zero COVID policy that China has in place at the moment, the lockdowns. I mean, we've seen lockdowns here in the UK, in the US, elsewhere, but this is different. It's much stricter, isn't it? People can't move around, can't do anything.
Right. I mean, especially in Urumqi, it was particularly strict. You can't get out of your apartment except when you get a COVID test. So the whole time you're in your apartment. And I think, if you're just in your apartment, if you have enough food, if you don't get sick, it's fine. The problem is that when you get sick, and oftentimes the people, the officials who are guarding the apartment complex, they don't let people leave the complex to go to the hospital. So people died because they could not go to the hospital. Then there are the people who can't get food because they don't know how to use the delivery app, or the delivery app are too busy. Then they are literally starving because they can't get food. Then there are people, they are in their apartment because they cannot go to work and they don't have a job. They don't make money, then they can't pay for the food. So, people are really suffering in the past 3 years because of this stringent COVID lockdown policy.
And Yaqiu, just to explain, I mean, I've seen some images that have been on American networks shared on there of some of the places where people are being sent to when they test positive for COVID, because we know that that COVID is on the rise again. It's reported that cases are increasing in China, but the state of the places that people are sent to just doesn't appear to be in any decent state to cope with the numbers. I've seen images of young children having to walk through flooded toilet areas to get to somewhere where they can sleep, of people being put in toilets to sleep. I mean, if there is this COVID policy, does China not have the systems in place to deal with the amount of people who are testing positive?
Well, I don't think the the things provided in those facilities adequate enough to treat the people or get the people well. Oftentimes, it's even not sanitary, and people or get sick because they were in such a crowded space where there's a lack of, clean towels, clean bathrooms. And there was a case, a young girl, after she was taken into the quarantine center, she died there because she wasn't treated for her undiagnosed medical illnesses. And there was this public uproar on the Chinese internet saying, why do you take people into that, unsanitary place? If the person was quarantined at home, maybe she would be fine. Instead, she died in this facility.
And in terms of the aspect that is political of this, I mean, we know it is unusual to see these widespread demonstrations, public demonstrations in China. I mean, comparisons are being made in terms of the last time that when there was a big public uprising being Tiananmen Square back in 1989. But what concerns do you have about the situation at the moment? What concerns does Human Rights Watch have in terms of how this could unfold in the coming days?
I am very inspired by the protests, but also I'm terrified because doing this job, I know how brutal the government can become if they wanted to suppress the protesters. And they have a track record of, detaining, harassing, imprisoning people for protesting, especially when you're protesting the government's hold on power of the country. And I mean, as you mentioned, the most notable case is 1989 Tiananmen massacre. The government literally sent out tanks and rolled over people's body, and those people were protesting peacefully. They were sitting on the square, right? And after that, there are many smaller crackdowns on protesters, also in a very abusive and brutal way. So I worry about the people who come to the street, yesterday and today, and demand for their rights. What could happen to them?
Very good to talk to you this morning. Thank you for joining us. That is Yaqiu Wang, who is the senior China researcher with Human Rights Watch. And just seeing images that in Shanghai, barriers have been erected at the moment, trying clearly to prevent protesters. Also, we're hearing that the state media, which is the media for the ruling Chinese Communist Party, has not made any mention of the protests. And another piece of information that's coming out this morning, the BBC says that one of its journalists was beaten and kicked by police while covering anti-lockdown protests in China. We'll keep you across the developments of what is happening there.